You're listening to Empowered to Lead, the therapist practice. I'm Lisa Catello, therapist, business coach, and your go-to for all things leadership and sustainable practice growth. This is your space for real talk, smart strategies, and grounded support to help you lead with confidence, work with intention, and build a business that actually works for you. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Empowered to Lead podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. And today we are talking to Becky Palmer, who is a clinician and also has her own podcast and trainings that are happening. And so I'm so excited just to chat with you, Becky, and to hear about some of the passions that you have around ethical and legal ways for us to operate as therapists, and then how that turns into with group practice owners having responsibility as well in there. So we met on a cruise. I have never been able to say that before. Yeah. And just really impressed with you and just your passion for helping therapists do their job well, and have been following along with your journey. And it is Friday after jet lag, and I'm forgetting the name. And this is why we practice. This is why we practice. Yeah. And looking forward to hearing more about that here. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey as a therapist to where you are now, and a little bit about the adventure that you're on with This Is Why We Practice.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. We met on a cruise in Alaska. We were very seasick, very excited. Met the eagles, and it was really neat. Yeah. Really cool place to meet.
Remember the meeting room, and we're like, people are tossing their cookies, and
and then we see the mountains come into view, and we're like, oh my gosh. Yeah, that was neat. And we were talking about sustainability in practice and leadership, and that cruise, the theme was self-care, leadership, and sustainability. So I've been a therapist. I'm in my 5th year as a therapist. Before I was a therapist, I was a pharmacist for 10 years. And 7 of those years I was in the Canadian Forces as a military. Okay. So leadership is and ethics and the principles of leadership, ethics, all of that is super, super interesting to me, important to me. And I think it's exactly what makes things sustainable, is by living off of these codes and ethics that have been tried and tested over time and lead to more positive results. Like, that's the whole point of all of ethics, is that we do no harm.
Yeah.
And we put the client at the center. And we're also protecting ourselves and our practice and our profession at the same time. So super, super important. And leadership is important too, because that makes things sustainable we're all headed in the same direction, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm also sick, so I've got a lozenge in my mouth. I just need to crunch it. Yeah, I need to get rid of it.
Yeah. So if you got some crunching.
Yeah, we're good now.
Yeah.
So I think leadership is such an important piece, because there's that saying that the fish stinks at the head, right? So if leadership isn't good, then the whole thing starts to stink, and the whole thing starts to break down. So that's why it's really important to me, coming up through the ranks or through as a pharmacy student, or it's been a lot better as a therapist because everybody's a lot more emotionally mature and aware. But like in pharmacy, for example, it was like there wasn't always the best leadership. There wasn't always the best, you had leaders or you had supervisors that threw their subordinates under the bus, or you had just really poor managers, poor leaders, and working underneath that, and how damaging that can be to the spirit and then also to the whole like vision and mission of the organization. So yeah, leadership is super, super important to me. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my background. Okay. And then I became the clinical director this last year. And so I help with maintaining that culture of ethics within our clinic, which I think we're we keep growing and growing. So
Mhm.
we've got quite a few practitioners now, and that means lots more need for support and networking and making sure everybody's feeling like they're still part of the team as we grow.
So you are working at OK Clinical in BC, and you are now the clinical director. And is that for all of the locations, or is that just for the office that you work out of?
Yeah, it's for all of the locations.
Okay. What would you say, how would you describe yourself as a leader because you're leading a number of therapists there in that role?
Yeah. So I'm very much like I'm treating people how I would like to be treated. So whether we're working through something tricky like a complaint, I would like to be treated with lots of empathy and understanding that there's multiple sides of the story. Whether we're working through supervision, I don't supervise the clinicians, but I do have students to supervise. So just really, as a learner, as somebody who stumbles and makes mistakes too, as somebody who's figuring things out as we go, we all want to be treated with dignity and respect. And so that's a big part of my leadership. And then also that we are collaborative. So we come together I like when people come to me with already they've started thinking out kind of what the solution would be. And then we can add the different parts from our different perspectives and make a plan collaboratively. So it's less of like this power dynamic of I figure out the solution and we do it. It's more so let's figure out the solution together. And I really like that about counseling because there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that need to fit together. And there's not always a clear answer. So sometimes we are throwing spaghetti at a wall.
Yes.
And see how it sticks and trying to figure things out the best we can, especially when it comes to making an ethical decision where we get as much information as we can and we the risks and the benefits, and we think about the principles, the ethical principles like in CCPA, and then we go for it.
Yeah.
And we deal with the consequences, right? So, yeah.
So tell me the route that your counseling career has taken, because you were in pharmacy, then became a counselor, you've been at OK Clinical, and now you're doing This Is Why We Practice. How did all of that fall into place for you?
Yeah. So to start way back in pharmacy, I didn't like pharmacy that much. I didn't love the pharmaceutical part, but I loved the healthcare aspect, and I loved like figuring out, like I loved understanding medicine, and I loved counseling people. And that's a big part of pharmacy is you're counseling on drug adherence. And I loved talking to people and helping them figure out things to improve their health.
Okay.
And so for a while I had a business as a health coach, and as I was also a pharmacist. And then I moved into doing my master's degree and was like, I'm just going to go full board doing counseling all the time.
Okay.
And so I already had a lot of experience though in counseling and in coaching. And so I dove right into counseling with quite a bit of experience. So even though I'm technically just in my 5th year, I feel like I brought a lot of life experience into hitting the ground with it.
Yeah.
So I definitely approached our group practice owner, Nicole. I approached her pretty early on being like, hey, I got some ideas I'd like to do and how I'd like to contribute more on like a leadership side. And she's amazing. So she was like, yeah, cool. And so we formed that relationship and that trust. And then when she needed to step away, I was able to step up pretty organically. So that brought me into the clinical, more of the clinical leadership role. And we had already been making courses, and I had these learning gaps and I couldn't find the answers in one place the way I needed them to be. And then I also was in this position where I needed to not only figure out the answers, these ethical questions or these subjects, like for example, in high conflict families, like I was learning a lot, but then I also had to be able to translate it and teach it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, and I have have a skill set where I like social media and I like editing and I like course development. I have a teacher side to me for sure.
Okay.
So I reached out to Betti White, who's a family lawyer in the Okanagan, and I found her on TikTok. She's like TikTok famous.
Okay.
And I reached out to her just being like, hey, I'm developing this ethics course. Could you just review it for me? I'll pay you your hourly rate. And she was like, let's meet. And so we met, and I think that first meeting we went into some kind of vortex of connection and passion project, right? Like, she's a very passionate lawyer, very ethical lawyer. And we just were like, let's do more. Like, let's do more together. So
just we came right off.
It just clicked. Yeah. And so we started developing courses, and that's kind of how that was born. So it started out as kind of a solo project, and it turned into something else unbeknownst to me, but in the best way. And so now, yeah, we're creating our third course now, a documentation course. We're getting to the end of creating that. That should be released hopefully by end of October. So, and we started out with a dual relationships course, ethics of overlap, and we also have a duty to report harm course. And I've got a whole bunch of ideas of other ones that I've needed, and I need me become a better teacher. And then as a byproduct, we've created these continuing education courses that are applicable to me anyway. So I'm hoping if they're applicable to me and they're applicable to my students and the people that I know, that they're also applicable across the board to BC and Canada.
What makes you choose the next topic or the next course?
Well, it's the first one I chose, I think, because I really wanted a topic that we could use one of the frameworks to work through ethical dilemmas.
Okay.
The second one was because it's a heavy topic and an intense topic that I wanted to really massage out kind of some details around the laws around the report and get clear on that. And the third one is because this is such a common question of documentation. Like, how do you do documentation properly? And this is a little bit more specific to private practice, but in private practice, like, what do you do when your clients have an ROR or your lawyers are asking for your documentation and they're going to be, your chart notes are going to be read by somebody outside of you, right? So that kept on coming up too in our practice, and we've developed new ROR procedures and policies and fairly recently. So, and then always the new clinicians and the interns always have questions about documentation. So yeah, it's like I said, like that element of me learning and pulling all my learning together and then needing to teach it right away. So that creates a course pretty organically.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about each course. That's one of the questions I had. She's a BC lawyer. So does the information that you guys are sharing, does it apply across Canada or is it BC specific?
Yeah, so we're pretty upfront that we are BC clinicians, both of us. So our primary focus is BC. There are a lot of things that apply across the board when it comes to ethics. When it comes to law, it's way more provincial. But there are also statutes and laws that you can look up across the board that are similar. It's just that, yeah, we kind of have to stick to our own domains. But there is so much crossover. Mm-hmm. So I believe I have a table in the duty to report harm course that lays out the different laws in different provinces. We can't get each of the one of them, so we chose BC to kind of really dig into, but it at least gives you a starting place of what laws to look up in your province, how that kind of goes across the board.
Why was it important for you to collaborate with a lawyer rather than just kind of do your own research and present your own material?
I get asked that question quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And to me, it felt self-evident. So it's interesting to me that I'm getting asked that question over and over. To me, it's demystifying that process. Because when it comes to ethics, what we worry about with ethics, one of the things we worry about with ethics, like the primary thing is doing no harm to our clients and doing the best by them. But then there's this element of self-protection as well. And what happens when ethics go really badly is that the law is involved, right? Like, or in high conflict divorces. So Betti is a family lawyer.
Okay.
So she works a lot with divorces and separations and has good knowledge of that area. So it's interesting to me to demystify the legal system and law because there is that overlap with ethics.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't feel so scary. And it reminds me a little bit about being a pharmacist and working with doctors. So if you don't work with doctors, you can kind of have an idea of that they're scary or they've got big egos and they're kind of seen in a society way as being kind of at the top of the pyramid and like you don't argue with a doctor kind of thing like oh, a doctor. But when you work with them, you realize that they're just people and they've got their strengths and they've got their weaknesses. And so there's like this demystifying of law that's the same of it, like really learning about it and being in relationship to it makes it less scary.
Yeah.
Same with like part work too. Like it's the same kind of thing, like demystify it, get into relationship with it, learn that it's just a protective part of a thing. And then we can deal with it. And then it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Yeah. Like the more you know about, or you know that you're getting factual information, then when you make those ethical decisions, it's like so many times we are scared of what a lawyer might say or the courts might say. And so here you've got it kind of from the horse's mouth of like, so you can be proactive rather than scared and reactive.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So for example, in the duty to report harm course, she goes over the definition of imminent risk. What does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? Because we learn it. We learn what it means to us as clinicians, but what does it mean in a law context? So things like that, where it's interesting to have these different perspectives. And to me, the law is relevant because the law is where we would get into hot water, so to speak, or what we need to have an understanding of it. And if you're working with families and you're working with high conflict or you're working with divorce, separation, then you want to have a good understanding of what people are going through too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So this podcast is primarily for mental health group practice owners. How would you suggest a group practice owner can use this material or to follow you, and how would they use that in supporting their team?
Yeah, so it's a good resource for ethical continuing education. And then also to have that groundwork to be able to pass on the information, whether you're learning the information and then passing it on verbally, or you've just got that foundation to pass it down if you're asked questions, or directing them directly to take the courses as well. So that would be, it's a resource for the ethical education piece, which RCC doesn't specifically, like BCACC right now doesn't specifically have an ethical category for our continuing education credits, but social work does. They have at least three per cycle have to be ethics related.
Okay.
So this is a resource, a hub for ethics related CE. And then it's also a direction you can point either interns, new grads, or even yourself as seasoned clinicians to get a refresher to be able to have the language to teach, right? Because we can know how to drive a standard, but to teach it is a different ballgame, right? Yeah. So sometimes you need that, even if it does feel a little bit more base level, or you already know the stuff, you need it put into a context or a framework in order to be able to teach it at a more beginner level. So it can be for that too.
Yeah. One of the things, as you were just talking, a lot of group practice owners now, the structure that they have is that they are bringing on students and with the hopes that that feeds into joining their team. And I think a lot of that brings a lot of responsibility. Not all programs have a really robust ethical program or really teaching you how to be a therapist on the ground kind of thing. And so a lot of group practice owners, we have had to create our own program of what kind of training do we want them to have and how do I want them to behave if they're a representative of my business kind of thing. So it sounds like these courses could feed in quite well for students. So I know that's your focus, is working with students. Is there a difference in the ethics, whether you're a student or you're a graduate and you've been doing this for a while? Would you say there's nuances there? Because sometimes I think we've been practicing for a long time and I know all this, right? So that's just for new people who are getting their feet wet. How would you say this applies both for new people and for established therapists?
Yeah. I think the whole idea around continuing education is sometimes it's about learning new information and sometimes it's a refresher, right? So we all can use refreshers around ethics because I know for me, I got one class in ethics, right? And so we can go back over the textbook, we can read through it, we can thumb through it, we can find courses, but we're always going to need refreshers. So for the more seasoned clinicians, it would be that. And then, like I said, giving you the language to be able to teach or pass it on to your interns or to your new grads. And then for the new grads and the interns, it may be new, completely new. It might not be a refresher. It might be, oh, okay. And because I don't know if you've ever read a book twice where you've read it once, something out of it, and then you read it again, right? That's kind of, you're coming from a different framework. Like if I were to take pharmacy school again, I'd be so great in it because I know so much now because I practiced, right? And it would actually be fun. So, right, it wasn't fun at the time though, because it was like they said to us all the time, it's like you're being fed through a fire hose here of knowledge. Like every midterm was like this much of notes. And so that's how overwhelming it feels when you're starting. So you absorb little bits of it, but then to have something to come back to that does have a little bit of novelty to it and freshness, or is directed towards your particular province or to Canada, because there's a lot of resources too that are great across the board, but they're not specific to BC or they're not specific to Canada, right? So that can be a piece of it that's missing as well. And that was what was missing for me, is like, I want to know for BC. I want to know and for the CCPA folks too, like across the board, but which is more so what we're taught in what I was taught, I guess, through Yorkville. But I had to learn all of the BCACC and the BC stuff on my own. So yeah.
I remember being in my ethics class, and we had to do a project on ethics, and a couple of people chose to do something on self-care. And I was like, why are you doing that? That's not ethics. And then now, as an established therapist, I'm like, oh, yes, that is, right? And so even as you're saying that, like, as you go through it, it's not actually until shit hits the fan that you're like, oh, okay, I heard this in that class, but I didn't really pay as much attention. How do I handle this? And so having those resources, because even when you look at the BCACC guidelines, sometimes it feels pretty vague. And so this, like, okay, the resources that you're sharing, a lawyer says this is what you need to know in context of the guidelines that we have. And it just gives more actionable, realistic steps when you're in the middle of it, rather than trying to remember 10 years ago what you were taught in your ethics class.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and because you have that context now of some practice and some experience, in a different way. It's easier to learn. It's more exciting to learn. It has more applicability, right? And like Betti always says, like, it's not legal advice, it's information. And that's really key here too, is that it's the same on my side as well. It's not clinical supervision. Because that you need that for like the actual, to break it down into your scenario, but it at least gives you a place to start with the information, right? And so that can be preventative, that can be protective, both for your clients and for your own yourself, and for the profession as a whole, because that's ultimately what those three things we're wanting to preserve. So, yeah.
What's your vision for This Is Why We Practice? What are you hoping it will turn into or grow into?
Yeah, I would like it to be, a learning hub and a place that I have an opportunity to teach and pass along this information that we've collected and packaged, and for it to grow into, an alternative to learn, like CEs, to collect CEs that is very real life, very interesting, and brings in an element that's a bit unique with the legal side of things. But at the end of the day is like, okay, I can use this on Monday kind of thing. And this actually gets me. This actually understands me as a BC practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that being able to provide that resource, and then being able to continue to teach and continue to learn what the profession needs as it grows and evolves, like towards regulation and towards the direction that we're going there, to be able to continue to be a leader in that, continue to be an educator, continue to be a supervisor, a director, and to be involved in that. And
Awesome. Well, I have been following you on social media, so I know you've got Instagram. How do people find you? How do they get all of this information?
Yeah, so the main place to start right now would be on Instagram, if you have Instagram. So we are This Is Why We Practice. So, and I like that name is like, this is why we practice. This is why we practice. This is why we practice, right? Like every emphasis. This is why we practice, right? So it has so much meaning depending on what emphasis you put.
Yeah.
So Instagram is the main place right now. Our platform is on Thinkific. Okay. So if you go to Instagram, you'll find the link tree. You can also email me at becky@okclinical.com, and I can send you links to different things. Yeah, so that's kind of how to get started. You can check out Betti on TikTok on her Betti White page.
I just think of Betti White, the actress. So is it?
Yeah.
It's Betty?
It's Betti.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think she's on TikTok. She's the real Betti White on TikTok. Yeah.
And she just shares legal information on there.
Okay. Yeah. Family law, legal information for British Columbia. And that's her passion. And then we've got This Is Why You Practice, which is continuing education for therapists for now. And it may evolve eventually to also lawyers and their continuing education.
Okay.
But that's a little down the road too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on here and sharing that information. Yeah, it's been fun to follow. Well, fun. It's been a good reminder and fun to follow you on Instagram. And yeah, just to have these resources primarily for BC group practice owners, but I think all continuing education and learning with the ethics side of things can be translated across the country. It just might be like, hey, I heard this or I took this course. I'm going to go ask my lawyer how that fits for our province too. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we will provide a link to your Instagram page, and maybe we'll get your Thinkific link too and put that in the show notes. And thank you everybody for joining us today, and look forward to having you come back to our next show.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
All right. See ya. Thanks for hanging out with me on Empowered to Lead, the therapist practice. I hope you're walking away with something that you can put into action, because leadership isn't about doing more, it's about leading with purpose. If you're ready for deeper support, I'd love to see you inside the Group Practice Connection, my monthly membership where Canadian therapists like you get coaching, community, and the tools to build a business that actually supports your life. You can check it out at grouppracticenetwork.ca. The link's in the show notes. And hey, don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss what's coming next. We're building something great here, and I'm so glad you're a part of it.